Between June 2015 and June 2016, 7 Barbies died on the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital in England. They were not expected to die. They were stabilizing. Some were days away from going home, and every single one of them collapsed while a 25-year-old nurse named Lucy Letby was on duty in 2023. A jury convicted her of murdering 7 of those Barbies and attempting to murder 7 more. She became the most prolific serial killer in modern British legal history. But this case is not closed, because the doctors who saw the pattern, who counted the bodies, who tracked the shifts, who begged hospital management to act, were told to apologize to her. The managers who ignored them have never stood trial, and the scientific evidence that put her in prison is now being questioned by some of the most senior neonatologists in the world. What I'm about to show you about the Excel spreadsheet that exposed the pattern, the handwritten notes that said, "I am evil, I did this," the hospital managers who chose silence over safety, and the international experts who now say the science was wrong, is the most contested true crime conviction I have ever covered. This is True Crime Explainer, where we follow the evidence and give victims back their story. Subscribe right now. Because what happened inside the Countess of Chester Hospital was not just a crime. It was a system failure, and 30 years from now, criminology students will still be arguing about whether justice was done. Before I take you into the evidence, before I show you the notes, the statistics, the science that is now under review, I want to spend time with the people this case is actually about. Because the Barbies of the Countess of Chester neonatal unit were not case numbers. They were not entries on a spreadsheet. They were infants who had fought to take their first breath. The unit was a level 2 neonatal intensive care unit. It cared for premature Barbies, Barbies born with complications, Barbies who needed round-the-clock monitoring. For their parents, it was a place of exhausted hope. Mothers who had been discharged without their children. Fathers who drove to the hospital twice a day to sit beside incubators and read to Barbies who weighed less than a bag of sugar. One mother told the court that she still hears the alarm tones in her sleep. Another father described walking onto the ward to find his son's skin had turned a colour he did not know skin could turn. A mother of twins said she watched Lucy Letby stand over her baby's cot, and minutes later her child was dead. One mother still folds baby clothes she never got to use. These were Barbies who had been fed through tubes, who had survived surgery, who were by every medical expectation going to live. Child A and Child B were twins. They collapsed within days of each other. Child E's mother walked in to find Letby standing over his cot. He died shortly after. Child O and Child P were twins born premature but fighting. They died within days of each other in June 2016, the deaths that finally broke the silence. In total, 17 Barbies were allegedly attacked. 7 died. 7 survived, some with catastrophic brain damage. And every single family was left with the same question: why did the people we trusted not stop it sooner? To understand why this happened, you have to understand the system that allowed it. The Countess of Chester Hospital in 2015 was under severe pressure. The neonatal unit was understaffed. There were sewage leaks in corridors near the ward. The ventilation system was failing. Consultants later testified that they were working in conditions that would have been unacceptable in a developing nation, but the systemic failure went deeper than infrastructure. It went to the culture of the institution itself. Senior consultants on the neonatal unit began noticing something that kept them awake at night. Barbies who were stable would suddenly collapse. Their skin would mottle and darken. Their lungs would fail. Their hearts would stop. And Lucy Letby was always on duty. One consultant, Dr. Ravi Jayaram, began keeping his own records. He noticed that the collapses clustered around her shifts. He raised his concerns with hospital management. In October 2015, he was told there was no pattern. In February 2016, the consultants begged hospital bosses to remove Letby from the ward immediately. They said they believed she was harming Barbies. Hospital management told them to apologize to her for making the accusation. Instead of removing her from clinical duties, bosses commissioned an internal review and delayed. They moved her to clerical duties only after the deaths of Child O and Child P in June 2016, a full year after the first death. For 12 months, while doctors begged, management protected the hospital's reputation. And while they delayed, more Barbies died, but the hospital was not the only system that failed. The breaking point came in June 2016, not with a single death, but with 2 twins, born premature but improving. They died within days of each other, both under Letby's care. And when the second twin died, the doctors refused to be silent any longer. What police found when they finally opened an investigation would become the most contested evidence in British legal history. Stay with me. The police were called in May 2017. By then, the Countess of Chester had already referred itself to regulators. But the criminal investigation did not begin in earnest until Cheshire Police launched Operation Hummingbird. What they found was a pattern that was almost impossible to explain away. Consultants had compiled an Excel spreadsheet, a timeline of every collapse, every death, every emergency on the neonatal unit between 2015 and 2016. The prosecution called it the Rosetta Stone. Lucy Letby was on duty for every single fatal collapse. She was on duty for nearly every non-fatal collapse. The prosecution's statistical expert told the jury that the odds of this clustering happening by chance were 1 in 72 million, but statistics do not commit murder. The police needed physical evidence. In 2018 they searched Letby's home, they searched her car, they searched her parents' home, and in her bedroom, tucked inside notebooks and crumpled in drawers, they found handwritten notes. "I am evil, I did this. I haven't done anything wrong. Help, good enough. Me." The defense argued these were the writings of a traumatized nurse, a woman who had been blamed for systemic failures beyond her control, who was grieving the loss of her patients, who was questioning her own competence in the face of impossible conditions. The prosecution argued they were confessions. Police also found her Facebook search history. She had searched for the families of her victims, not once, repeatedly. In the early hours of the morning, 11 searches for one family alone. In July 2018, she was first arrested. In November 2020, she was charged with murder. The trial began in October 2022 at Manchester Crown Court. It lasted 10 months. The jury heard from hundreds of witnesses, and the prosecution built its case on 3 methods of killing. Prosecution expert Dr. Dewi Evans testified that some Barbies showed sudden skin discoloration, a dark, mottled appearance, consistent with air being injected directly into their bloodstreams. He told the jury that the speed of collapse, the specific skin patterns, and the failure to respond to resuscitation all pointed to deliberate air injection. The defense said Barbies turn purple for 100 reasons. Premature infants have fragile circulatory systems. Post-mortem lividity creates identical coloring. The skin alone was not proof of murder. 2 Barbies, a child F and child L, suffered catastrophic drops in blood sugar. Prosecutors said the only explanation was tampering with their TPN bags, the nutrition fluids delivered directly into their veins. Traces of insulin were found in unused bags stored near the ward. The defense said the insulin testing was flawed. The TPN bags were stored in a shared refrigerator. They could have been contaminated. The blood sugar crashes could have been caused by other medical conditions common in premature Barbies. Child O, a baby boy, suffered liver damage so severe that a pathologist compared it to the force of a high-speed car crash. The prosecution said Letby had delivered a blow or a kick to his torso. His twin brother, child P, died days later from what prosecutors said was deliberate suffocation. The defense said the liver damage could have been caused by aggressive resuscitation attempts, chest compressions performed by medical staff trying to save his life. The jury had to choose between 2 realities. Either Lucy Letby was a serial killer who murdered Barbies in plain sight, or she was a scapegoat for a failing hospital. But the most important development in this case did not happen in the courtroom, it happened after the verdict, and it involves the science that put her there. In August 2023, the jury returned their verdicts: guilty of murdering 7 Barbies, guilty of attempting to murder 7 more. Mr. Justice Goss sentenced Lucy Letby to life imprisonment with whole life orders. She will never be released. He told her she had acted with cruelty and calculation. He said she had abused the trust of her profession and the trust of every parent who handed her their child. But in 2024, a doctor 4,000 miles away looked at the same evidence and saw something completely different. Dr. Shu Lee, former president of the Canadian Pediatric Society and one of the most respected neonatologists in the world, led an independent review. His team concluded that the skin discoloration used to diagnose air embolism could be explained by other conditions common in premature Barbies, conditions that have nothing to do with injected air. If he is right, the skin discoloration that convinced a jury of murder was just a sick baby being a sick baby. They argued that the insulin testing methodology was flawed. They argued that the evidence did not support murder. Other international experts joined him. Neonatologists from the United States, Australia and Europe signed open letters questioning the safety of the conviction. They said the jury had been presented with scientific certainty that did not exist. The Criminal Cases Review Commission, the body that investigates potential miscarriages of justice in England and Wales, received Letby's application. As of 2026, that review is ongoing. If the CCRC finds fresh evidence or unsafe conviction, they can refer the case to the Court of Appeal. Meanwhile, the Thirlwall inquiry, chaired by Lady Justice Thirlwall, has been hearing evidence about the NHS failures at Chester. It has heard that hospital managers prioritised reputation over patient safety, that consultants were bullied for raising concerns, that the system failed the Barbies before any nurse could. The inquiry has not determined Letby's guilt or innocence. That is not its job. Its job is to answer a different question. How did a hospital allow so many Barbies to die before it acted? And the answer, according to the evidence, is because the system chose to protect itself. The parents of the Barbies have been left in the middle of this storm. Some believe justice was done. Others believe the truth was buried under a conviction that will now take years to unravel, and Lucy Letby maintains her innocence. She has never confessed. She has shown no remorse because, her supporters say, there is nothing to confess. The Barbies of the Countess of Chester Neonatal Unit were betrayed twice. First by whoever harmed them, whether that was Lucy Letby, or whether it was the conditions of a ward that should never have been open. Second by a hospital management structure that heard alarms and chose silence, that saw a pattern and chose reputation, that told doctors to apologise instead of investigate. Whether Lucy Letby is a serial killer or the victim of a catastrophic miscarriage of justice will be decided by the appeal process, by the CCRC, by the courts, by the slow grinding of a system that is now, finally, being forced to look at the evidence again. But what is already proven is this: the Countess of Chester Hospital failed those Barbies. It failed to listen to its own doctors. It failed to act when the pattern was clear. It failed to protect the most vulnerable patients in its care. And 7 Barbies who should have gone home to their families never did. If you believe those Barbies deserve to be remembered not as case numbers, but as lives lost in a system that failed them, hit the like button right now. It tells YouTube to show this story to someone else who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments what part of this case you cannot stop thinking about. The notes, the hospital managers, the science. Because this community always has the most important things to say, and I read every single one. Subscribe if you haven't. Turn on notifications. The Barbies of Chester deserve to be remembered.